We do it in person. We do it online. We want non-veterans, people like me, to hear their stories. The proposition is that when you enter the military, something happens to you. Something happens to you. You get indoctrinated. You get indoctrinated in a subculture that's very different from the civilian world, and yet it makes an impact on you that lasts the rest of your life. And my idea is that the rest of us who haven't served can learn something from those who have, that veterans bring a certain perspective, broad experience, wisdom, coping at a young age with trauma in many cases, with loss, and that we could all learn from what the veterans have to share. So it's been one of the honors of my life to be a part of the Veterans Breakfast Club. I'm not a veteran. I don't come from a military family. I was an adult before I realized that Memorial Day was more than a 3-day weekend. And so I've continually have an education when I work with veterans. So I'm going to be asking some dumb questions to our illustrious guests here for Women's Veterans Day. And as a historian, I'm very excited to be a part of this because this is the 76th anniversary of the Women's Armed Services Integration Act, which Harry Truman signed. This was a close call in Congress. This was not an easy thing to pass. Up until 1948, this date in 1948, women had served in the military, but only on an emergency basis. Only if there was an emergency need for them. So, for example, Betty and Julia were members of the WAVES, Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. After the emergency passed, they're out. It was the Integration Act that allowed women to be a permanent part of the military. So, a very significant change in our history, progress in our history. And women joined a subculture that had been male-dominated and masculine-defined, and still is, for generations. And women had to find a way to accommodate themselves to this culture, and the culture has had to find ways to accommodate itself to the women. This is a change that I think we're still undergoing. So I thought, Betty. Hi, Betty.
Hi there.
Good to see you. I'm going to turn on your mic. There you go.
Oh, okay.
This is Betty Digby, who turns 100 years old August 11th. She was born and raised in a house that her grandfather built in what used to be called West Liberty, the borough of West Liberty. It then became incorporated part of Lower St. Clair. And Betty, can you tell us I want to ask you a little bit about the community of West Liberty where you grew up.
Okay. Oh, you want me just to describe it? Oh.
Yeah, I want you to talk.
Okay. It was called West Liberty because
Hold it.
Okay, there were really two parts of in liberties in the state in Pittsburgh. In other words, there's West Liberty and East Liberty, and they were sections of the city where people could come and, like my grandparents, they wanted to raise cattle and sell the milk from the cows and things like that throughout the city. But they were given the liberty to graze their cattle, their cows, on the public land that surrounded that. And so there was the one here on the south side, and then over there in the Oakland East Liberty. Yeah.
And what? Yeah. The West Liberty was located right where the south portal of the Liberty tunnels come out.
Yes.
So this is before Betty was born, before those tunnels existed.
Oh, yeah.
So this was cattle grazing area. This is where she grew up. And then when the war came, you decided you wanted to join the military. Why?
Yes. At that time, we had just gone through the Great Depression years, and I had graduated from from college when I was 16. I'm not from college. Oh man, I just got out of the emergency room at noon time, so I'm a little bit floggy. But anyway. I had graduated from high school, and I wanted to be a court reporter. So I studied stenotypy in the first class of stenotypy in the city of Pittsburgh. And but when I graduated from that, the only opening they had was in the family court, and I was only about 17 at that time. And they said that was not a proper place for someone my age. So I just sort of hung around and worked a little bit, and then I guess you had to be 20 in order to sign up for the service without parental consent. And I had my siblings were. They were born in 38, 40, and 42, so they were little, and I didn't dare say I was going to sign up for the service at that time because my brother was already thinking of serving in the Marines. So anyway, I waited for my 20th birthday, and on the lunch hour on my 20th birthday, I went down and signed up for the waves.
You did not tell your parents you were doing it?
No. I didn't have the nerve to. Yeah. So anyway, they didn't say much about it, but my grandmother, knowing that some of my relatives who had already been in the war for a long period of time, in fact, one of my cousins was in the very first draft and the very first amphibious invasion of North Africa and the first amphibious invasion of Sicily before he was sent back to England, and he was awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart for what he had done in North Africa. So being trained then for the D-Day invasion, well, anyway, I had my friends, my future husband, I had met when I was on the high school newspaper, so he was in the war, and all my other friends were there. And when the D-Day invasion came in 44, I thought I had to do something. I just had to get out there and do something for them. I wasn't going to just sit around and that. And I never thought, hey, I could have been a riveter or something like that. You know, one of those Rosie the Riveters? No, but but the only opening at that time, the one they were pushing at that time, was the Navy. And of course they had Maine Bochet designer uniforms and stuff like that. So yeah, I couldn't fit into one today, and I didn't have time. I had to get a neighbor to come and get me to help me get dressed today. Anyway, I signed up, and my grandma said she understood. She was the only one that said anything.
Isn't that wonderful? You had a wonderful, supportive grandmother who understood what this could mean for you. Did you know that the Navy really didn't want to have you in it? They were forced to because they had such what was called then a manpower shortage. A study showed in 1942 that the Navy was short of over 100,000 people. And the only way they could fill those slots was by admitting women. So they you know how the Navy is, very reluctantly agreed to. So a lot of Navy waves served in administrative roles in Washington, D.C. Is that what you did?
Yes, I did. I was very fortunate. Being a stenotypist, I guess, because when after I went to basic training at Hunter College, but just for a short time, they had to discipline us. I think that was the thing. But then they sent us overnight in an old cattle car, and it had wicker seats. I think they put the seats there, and in the corner of the car, it had the fire, the stove that would. So they took us up around through Canada. They never take you. They always take you at night, and they never take take a direct route. So we traveled through Canada to Iowa State Teachers College, and it was there that they trained us to be in trained us the history and everything like that. And it was there that that they were giving exams and everything. So I passed a test and a dictation. I was taking 200 words a minute, and I had typing it, transcribing it at 75 words a minute. So anyway, I guess they thought that was okay. So they sent me down. Anyway, they sent me down to Washington, and I worked in the executive office of the Secretary of the Navy then. And but the direct part of that, I worked in the Office of Research and Naval Research and Development, and it was there that we searched for inventions and things that would enhance the military. And I worked for patent attorneys, and we just did everything. We had security of high security at that time, but that wasn't the highest that they had. I always thought it was the highest, but it was only last year that I found they had a higher rank, and it was Q, and it was people who dealt with atomic research. And I knew a fella for the last 20 years that personally, I never knew he was there. He could have been working in there, but see, I wouldn't have been allowed to work with him anyway. So I worked for there. I worked there. Oh, mm-hmm.
Betty, I've read about Washington, D.C. in World War II. It doubled in size in about a year in population. I think it ended up almost tripling in size. Most of the new people who moved to Washington during the war were young women. Yeah. To fill a lot of jobs. Yeah. It must have been a really exciting time for a young woman like you from West Liberty.
Well, I mean, it was a different existence from what I had down there in West Liberty Valley. Man. But we had our barracks. They were temporary barracks, and they were at the foot of the National Cemetery there. And the Navy Department at that time, it was a permanent building, but it was right at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial there, right at the reflection pool there. And so I would walk over the bridge, walk to and from work there, and they said they said after a while, they said, "Oh, those temporary barracks, they were awful." And I said, "Gee, they look pretty nice. They were better than the ones I had better than I had at home."
Yeah.
At home I had no modern conveniences. My house was built in the 1800s.
So we're talking no bathroom, no running water, outhouse, right?
Yeah.
Betty, what is your secret to longevity?
I guess a grateful heart. I have a grateful heart, I'll tell you. And I think the thing that changed my life, and I'm sincere about this, was being in the service. Because when I was there, living how I was, I mean, I lived on the other side of the tracks. Yeah. And people looked at me as living at the other side of the tracks. And I got in the service, and although they were highly educated people, I mean, the people I worked with all had undergraduate degrees in some kind of an engineering field and things like that. And then they had law degrees. And so, but they treated me the same way as if I was one of them. Sometimes they invited me to lunch or to dinner with them with their families over on Sundays for Sunday dinner and that. And they were just so great to me that it changed. It really did. It changed my life. It changed my way of how I saw people, and how it was just a wonderful experience.
Betty, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your story. And we have Julia Parsons here. Julia turned 103 on March 2nd. Julia was also a Navy Wave. You were a graduate of what was then called Carnegie Tech, and now Carnegie Mellon University, not Robert Morris. And Julia, I remember when you told me something like that you had wished or you had wanted to be an engineering major, but women could not major in engineering in those days?
That's right. they just laughed when I said I wanted to be an engineer. So, but now they're all over the place. So